Formaldehyde is actually typically used as an embalming thing for mummies to preserve
the dead.
And it's a massive problem when we spend about 90% of our time indoors.
People feel like going green is a punishment.
That is the hardest thing that we have been trying to convince people of.
It's the painful journey of a startup founder. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the SIXiDER Show, where we ask tough questions to the merchants, interior designers, vendors related to the interior design industry. I'm your host, Lester Leong, aka The Design Nerd, and joining me here today, we have the founder of Gush Paints, Gush Earls. Hi Lester, welcome.
Thank you for having me. My name is Lester. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gush. Just want to quickly introduce who we are. So Gush develops sustainable building materials that are cost, maintenance, and energy efficient. The idea for us is really to go beyond the surface to construct the future we can all gush about.
Nice. Looks like you rehearse yourself. Yeah,
I practice in the mirror like 5 times every morning before I go to work.
Wow. I think they have this thing about startup founders is that we have to be ever ready for the elevator pitch.
Yes.
Like 1 minute pitch, right? I'm really excited to have Lester joining us here because I've been a sustainability interior design advocate for like 13, 15 years. Back then where nobody's talking about it and I was talking about it because got one night, right, I was watching Discovery Channel. There was this episode where an architect was talking about how he could master plan a town or a city in a sustainable way. And it's usually talking about things from a very macro perspective.
Yes. Big
space, big impact. There I was like suffering from insomnia, cannot sleep, and I was just going like watching the thing. I was thinking that, hey, actually, if I do 100 spaces a year just by accumulation, actually that's quite substantial as well. In terms of surface area, in terms of square footage of impact. So I took it upon myself to start the journey to be a sustainable interior designer. Then there was also not so much literature about it. There was a lot from the States, the leads, and then you have like Green Guard and all that. But it's usually about the countries or spaces that actually have 4 seasons. And Singapore is in a tropical. We really don't have much about it.
Yes.
And kind of over time, right, things have changed, right? I think of late, a lot of people are very concerned about sustainability, not just because of going green, but also because of wellness. Especially in the last 2 years or so, a lot of people go into their interior space after renovation and they find that they are choking. They have like the fumes, the formaldehyde.
Yeah.
And I think this is also your time to shine, right? And is it also an appropriate time for Gush to kind of come to the scene and change the perception of what people feel about A, green paints at home, and B, how people perceive paints at home?
Absolutely. I think people think about green products just as in having less of bad things inside. So most of the green paints in the market, they have like low VOCs. Very rarely you have no VOCs, but I think people are trending towards that direction. But low VOCs doesn't mean that it's sustainable or good for you in that complete sense. It just means that there's less of bad items inside the paint itself. For Gush, what we've always thought about from the ground up is how can we make paints not just low VOCs, we can make it no VOCs, and also as a bonus can break down VOCs inside the house. VOCs, by the way, stands for volatile organic compounds. These are compounds that are aerosolized in the indoor space. So basically in a room temperature, your carpets, your laminates, your traditional paints will release a lot of these toxic pollutants in the indoor environment, and that's what causes things like sinus issues, childhood asthma, so on and so forth. It results in all the smells that you have in the indoor environment as well. So that's one way that we've differentiated ourselves quite differently from the competition. But as you mentioned about the broader master plan for sustainability, actually the building environment constitutes about like 70% of the spaces that we have around us, and about 40% of carbon emissions is actually coming from this built environment itself. So the potential for impact is dramatic, right? So if within all our different realms of being able to build this areas from ground up in building blocks that are safe and sustainable and healthy, then actually there's a lot of room for impact that everybody can make for the wider and more macro scale town and city that we have in where we live.
I concur, and I think that what's unique about Gush is that, as what you aptly put, is that it's not just a paint that's about negative this or less of this, less of that, but more like the paint itself has a performance role. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people may not understand, which is basically it helps to purify the air.
Yes.
So that's like basically having a tech, or in our world, in terms of design, it's called passive performance, which is basically no electricity, no gear, no attachment, silently does its work and performs this function.
Yes.
So if I would take an example to a layperson, it would be you will have an air filter and it filters the air, but it has components like basically the wires, it requires energy. And then, of course, the internal filters, cartridges, which you need to replenish, change, maintenance, a bunch of work. Then, in contrast, you have paint that requires the painter painting it, and then you leave it alone, and it does its function.
I'll expand on what that is. I mean, we first looked in the market, and there's a lot of air purifiers around. Air purifiers will take away all this particulate matter. In more common terms, we call it like PM 2.5. So the particulate matter that is 2.5 size-wise. And this is what would cause like blockages in your respiratory systems. It will interfere with your lungs, with your respiratory tracts. And that's what causes a lot of illnesses, especially in the young. Then apart from that, there's also another type of pollutant, like the chemical pollutants that are released, as I mentioned just now, the volatile organic compounds. These are two different things that are present in the indoor space. So the air purifiers that are electrically and mechanically powered, these are all able to, via the HEPA filters, are able to remove these PM 2.5 particulate matter that's in the indoor environment. But they may not remove the chemical pollutants. And that's where we come in. So the paints are able to help act as a, like you said, passive performer to be able to break down these pollutants. And how we are able to do that is that we've actually developed a catalyst. We have affectionately called it the Gush proprietary catalyst, GPC. And it reacts with oxygen as well as water vapor, so O2 as well as H2O in the air. And it forms these things called reactive oxygen species. And these are things like hydroxyl radicals. A bit chim, but basically these are silent warriors close to the wall that then interacts with the pollutants, typically long-chain reactive pollutants like formaldehyde, benzene, toluene in the air, and it breaks it down into harmless byproducts. So one of the key things that we face right now, and it's getting a lot of attention, is formaldehyde. Right, formaldehyde is very common in traditional indoor materials, and this formaldehyde is actually typically used as an embalming thing for mummies, to preserve
the dead.
To preserve the dead.
Yeah.
It's also used in a lot of adhesives because of its properties. And that also is also a carcinogen, right? So we want to get rid of that as much as we can. These radicals that we release from the catalyst actually is able to react with these things like formaldehyde, chemically denoted as HCHO, and breaks it down into H2O as well as CO2 as byproducts. This breaks this long-chain reactive pollutants down into its most inert and healthy forms. So H2O is water vapor, CO2 is carbon dioxide. These two things are things that people don't really have any adverse reactions with. Whereas instead of having the formaldehyde interact with the people, the biological elements like your respiratory tracts and your body in the indoor environment. So that's how we are able to complement air purifiers that are indoors to remove and help to make the indoor environment a lot cleaner for the people inside. And this, maybe just to carry on a little bit more, this is also a big problem because indoor air pollution can be 3 to 5 times worse than outdoor air pollution. And it's a massive problem when we spend about 90% of our time indoors. That's insane. I mean, if you think about it, how much time do you spend outdoors in this Singapore heat?
Yeah.
Not much, right? So most times it's in this air-conditioned environment. And air conditioner also, like, it will circulate the bad air inside even more. The good and bad air. And so that's where we come in. We want to try and make that a lot healthier and better for the people inside.
We'll talk more about the efficacy and all that. But I also understand that the product has other wellness benefits, like besides the air purification, it's also good in terms of like humidity control.
That's right. I think when we thought about this product, we wanted to engineer it specifically for the Singapore market. And we listed out a few things that Singapore's climate is known for. One, Singapore is very densely constructed. So we wanted to see how can we tap on these walls first to deliver impact. And then there came paints. Singapore is also very hot. Singapore is also very humid. So on the hot side, we wanted, we'll look at that in another product that maybe I'll share more later because it has to deal with the exteriors. For the interiors, the humidity actually results in things like mold, not just on walls, it also causes mold to grow spread further into your couches, into your precious handbags, things like that. So we wanted to see how can we reduce the effect of mold even from the bigger surface area around us. So from the walls, with paints, we developed a paint to be very porous. And the scientific word for it is also hygroscopic. Hygroscopic means that it has the nature of being able to absorb moisture from the atmosphere. So the paint layer is essentially like a sponge if you think about it. And any surface moisture can be absorbed very quickly into the surface of the paint. And because of the wider surface area, it's able now to allow for that moisture to evaporate. So earlier I mentioned the problem of mold. Mold typically happens in highly humid areas, in areas like your washrooms, in areas like your stairwells when there's no ventilation, or those walls that are adjacent to an aircon unit. So usually we find close to the vents of the aircon a lot of green and black mold. That is really because it's because of the temperature differential between the
condensation.
Condensation happens, and when there's condensation stuck on the surface, it then becomes very prone for mold growth whenever the spores land on that surface to emerge and spread. So because of the porosity of the paint, it's able to absorb that moisture very quickly and allow that moisture to spread across the white surface area of the paint. And due to the white surface area of the paint, it's then able to allow it to evaporate faster. So the paint is actually breathable in nature. It's able to absorb moisture, allow it to evaporate, absorb and evaporate. So because of that breathability, the surface is always dry, which means that later on, even if the spores land on the surface, it lacks the vital ingredient for growth. It lacks moisture. So mold finds it very difficult to grow on our walls. And this is why in Singapore, because mold is such a huge problem, if you look for any mold remediation specialists, there is quite a high chance that they're actually using Gush paints to help to remediate after they do the mold treatment.
Hey, if you made it this far into the episode, I've got news for you. We must have done something right. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, it doesn't bite. Give this episode a like, unless you're one of those people who enjoy renovation nightmares. Then maybe don't. And if you know someone about to renovate their home, thinking of hiring a designer, or just want some honesty about the industry, share this with them. Send it to your group chat, heck, forward it to your in-laws. We won't judge. This is the SIXiDER Show, where we design with purpose, ask the questions no one dares to ask, and spill the plaster, not just the paint. Subscribe, like, share, or risk being ghosted by your renovator again. So yeah, Lester, I actually feel that with what you're saying, right, there's an analogy that I want to use to describe what you just mentioned. You know, like in an aquarium, right, there's actually all the fishes inside. And truth be told, the fishes, once they're inside the fish tank, they cannot escape already. They're inside there forever. So they will defecate there, they will eat there, they will have wastages, they will have everything, including if they die, you know, they will rot inside there. And so basically, there's a lot of ammonia built up. Now, in a well-cycled fish tank, the biocycle comes in. Besides the mechanical filtration and all that, the biocycle does its job, whereby the ammonia that builds up, which is toxic to the fish, gets converted to nitrite, and then in that process, nitrite gets converted to nitrate, and then it becomes gaseous and it goes off. In marine tanks, there will be other sea animal invertebrates like oysters, clams, scallops, and even sponges, where porosity also comes in to play a part in the filtration of the water. So in our world, with architecture and interior design, we study the importance of passive components. Just like, you know, if a well-run fish tank is to, you know, be sustainable, it also requires the same things, which is basically not be overly dependent on the mechanical filtration, but also have the biocycle well cycled in, so that actually you have peace of mind knowing that the bio part is doing its job. And while your mechanical filter will also do its job, but it's really not the one that's doing the main performance one. Yeah. So you think it's an apt analogy to?
It's the first time I've heard of this. I think it's fantastic, and it's to the T. And humans are essentially like the fish in the tank, right? We're essentially going from one fish tank to another fish tank, from our home to our office to the car to etc. etc. And each time, you know, we're living with all this said ammonia that's built up in the indoor environment, circulated by the AC that we use. So both the good and the bad air are circulated. So you need both the mix of a mechanical air purifier to remove the ammonia from this environment, and also something that's passive, like our paints, that can help to remove the chemical pollutants indoors. This is great. And this is how fish can then flourish, right? And how like humans can also flourish in our indoor spaces, in which we spend 90% of our time with.
So like in an ideal scenario, we'll have our aircons, we'll still have our air purifier, but then we'll have Gush paints and plants.
Yes.
right? Just like an aquarium. We really basically like if you kind of put in all these pieces together, right? Especially as an interior design point of view, right? Really, a space is usually built up by a sum of everything, and it's not just about aesthetics and comfort, but also whether passively can the space perform in a healthy way as well.
That's right.
So there's a new way to kind of like address this.
Yeah.
That I think then it's more than visual already. It's about wellness in a very holistic way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then like putting all the different decor inside the fish tank is the interior design part.
Correct. Damn good, this analogy. But with all what you say, right, it still boils down to a certain level of understanding and acceptance to this. Like not everyone is a fish keeper.
Yes.
And not everyone is academically versed in chemicals and chemistry, for example. And so when you sell this product, when you're like market and you're trying to propagate Gush, right, it's innovative, right? But what are the challenges when it comes to like trying to push this and tell people that it's application and all that? Because I'll be honest, my more than 1 decade long propagation of this sustainability has been really difficult. My personal take on it is that people feel like going green is a punishment. Because the early introduction to sustainability and going green, right, has been costly and it's difficult to use. To give a very layman perspective to this, the earlier days of recycled toilet paper don't flush very well. And they are really literally a pain in the ass to wipe. Yeah, very abrasive and all that. And so much so that I think that it nurtured a group of people to think that, really it's a pain in the ass to use green stuff.
Literally.
Yeah.
I think definitely it's been difficult. And especially so because our products, the more you can't notice it, the better it is. So the more there is no smell.
Like feng shui.
Yes, something like that. Our flagship products, our care, clean care, there's absolutely no smell at all, right? So you won't be able to smell it. So you won't be able to smell it and you won't be able to see the mold. Our Clear Cool films, this is a different product altogether for the windows. The selling point is that it's extremely clear. Yeah, so it works because it's so hard to see. In so doing, how then do we bring the invisible to visible? That is the hardest thing that we have been trying to convince people of.
What you mean is basically creating a visual or tangible aspect that people can see that it's performing. How do you do that?
So actually, when we first started out, we actually did a lot of air quality tests. Demonstrations, yeah. Before and after painting, how does the air quality then change? And in fact, in 2019, we actually received a big investment from CDL, City Developments Limited, and they were particularly enamored with this idea of air purifying paints. Before they invested, actually, they did a 6 months due diligence on us by getting a NTU professor. This is about my NDA, sorry. So I'm going to try and make this as NDA as possible. They got NTU professor to come in to do a test.
To audit you.
To audit, to make sure that Gush Paints actually can help to remove all these pollutants.
So it's not greenwashing, no fluff.
It's not. Fundamentally, we try to be as much backed by science, by data, as much as we can. So through that study, we compared our paints versus other paints in the market that are odorless, and there are some other paints that have emerged that say they're air purifying as well. You measure the efficacy over time, and ours, the reason why we're sitting here and why we are also like invested by CDL is because we emerge as the one that does the most, and it's the one that's true to what we claim. So there's indeed an effect before and after how the air quality changes in terms of the volatile organic compounds, the formaldehyde, and also in terms of humidity levels in the indoor environment. A lot of these things can be done very well with lab tests, but when it comes to the indoor environment, because there is so much other things that are in place, typically when we work with interior designers, the paint is being applied to the walls. At the same time, some other carpentry work is going somewhere, some other plumbing work is going on. So then there's a lot of other extraneous factors that come in to interfere and to interact with the readings. So this is why sometimes we get quite a botched reading, but end of the day, we can also see then the effect over time of the air quality readings going improving over time. I would also say that actually, beyond all these measurements, the other softer elements is that we have many customers that come back to us and say that they have felt better. They stopped having the mucuses in the morning, they stopped having the sinus issues. There was a homeowner that told us that their kitchens smelled less greasy afterwards. I don't really know how that works, but but that was the testimonial. It's important to note that, apart from all these gadgets that we have, our noses and our health are also one of the strongest sensors of our environment.
But if I were to suggest a visual presentation, right? And in an extreme context, and if I were to again use the aquarium analogy, you know, when we put soil into the fish tank, it will take time to settle. Usually with the pump and the filter, in a matter of hours, depending on the size of the tank, the water becomes clear, right? It polishes the water and all that. If we were to do like an unboxing component, let's say we take a piece of wood and we paint an 8x4 piece of plywood with your paint, and we fog up this whole room. Would we be able to conclusively see a A/B test that the fog would actually disperse or be absorbed faster with the painted sample?
I say there's a small effect. Why I say small is because the fog, and like what we can see visually, it's usually a result of the particulate matter, and that's not something that we solve for. So the air purifiers machines are the ones that solve for that using the filters. For us, we get rid of the chemical pollutants inside, and things like formaldehyde, your benzene, your toluene, that's
all the
common.
invisible stuff.
That's all odorless, colorless. Typically in the room.
So in the sense that it is not going to be dramatic. There's no way that dramatically we can demonstrate this.
Yes.
Because the properties that the paint is trying to deal with are essentially invisible. And with the right reading tools in terms of measurement of the internal air quality and all that, we should be able to tell.
Yes.
And I understand that actually you have an experience center in your HQ that kind of demonstrates this. Can you share a little bit more about your experience center?
So actually Gush is situated at the BCA Academy, and we are very proud to be actually one of the first private companies to move into BCA, with our neighbours being the authorities for building construction as well as the Singapore Green Building Council. So over there, we actually have a studio, and the studio is really more for our customers to come in and see the colors. We're able to show them our materials, and then depending on the appointment, we're also able to show them like the smells of the product and things like that. So going to the air purifying effect of that may be a bit tough because it's hard to see visually, but we then have things, we can back it up with third-party lab tests, certifications, and so on. Maybe at this point, I just want to share like the other thing that we have been able to prove very well visually is the feature for anti-mold. Because mold is the most visual thing, and it's also the reason why a lot of people complain about the home or
the musky smell.
Yeah, the musky smells. So these are things that are visible. They are smellable. What's the
obvious to the
obvious to the nose.
Yeah.
So then these things are apparent to the people inside. You know, you put side by side our paints versus another paint in the market, or our paints versus no paint at all. It is very, very evident how our paints are able to prevent that mold growth from continuing on a recurring basis.
Don't worry, I will find a chance to do an unbox of your product. And then we will find creative ways to do all these tests with you, with your product, to see how we can visually prove to people that the product itself is passively doing its job. And it's almost like saying that, you know, we also cannot see how plants are, you know, purging the air of the toxicants and all that, but we know that it does these two things. One is that it lowers temperature, and the second thing is that it purifies the air. How do you know it's working? All right. And so let's try this. One of these days we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna share with you guys.
Oh, you have so much great analogies today. I'm gonna steal all these.
No, but I think it's absolutely true, because those things that you describe, right? It's almost like saying your plant has a natural element, and it's not so much that it's. Now we already know that it's not a mechanical thing; it's passive. But then the way that you describe, right? Subconsciously, I just remember how plants are doing that. How an ecosystem, a confined ecosystem, requires a mixture of biocycle as well as mechanical filtration. And you can use alcohol here, but it's exactly how I draw reference from.
But this is great. I mean, like plants release a lot of oxygen in the day. How do you know it's happening? You don't know, right?
You can't tell. Yeah. And the thing about like plants, right? Why they used to be in pots and now they are going onto the wall, right? Because there was this guy, right, called Vera, and then he's quite famous. His company's called Greenology, and he does vertical plants.
Yeah, I know them.
And he was explaining to me that in indoor spaces these days, when you put a potted plant, right, and if you were to just remove all the leaves and place them on the ground, maybe they only form 1.5 square feet worth of leaf area. But if you were to put them on a wall, right, that so-called square footage actually increases. So it calls this gross leaf area.
Wow.
Right? Gross leaf area substantially increases
so cool.
if you put it on the wall, because real estate on the floor is expensive, but real estate on the wall is virtually not touch one. So he puts them on the wall, and then the plant's doing its job, becomes air filters and a lower temperature. And of course, psychologically, you look at it, you feel shook.
Yes.
Here's the thing, right? If you draw in comparison, paint covers a huge amount of surface area in the space. Right? So if it does its job and purifies the air, heck, there's a lot of gross leaf area we're talking about here. And if you paint the color that you like, psychologically, paint does effects to your well-being as well.
Yes.
Wow, you got a lot of material already. But I think behind all this, right, it's the painful journey of a startup founder. You want to share a little bit more how Gush got started and this journey for the last 8 years, 2017, right? You
2017.
founded 2017. Right. Yeah. And from a startup founder's point of view, right? Maybe you can share a little bit more to me about your journey.
I mean, Gush has been around for more than 8 years now.
Yeah.
We started in 2017. But I mean, growing up, I had very bad sinus issues. So every morning I wake up with like
runny nose
tissues my side. My co-founder had very bad asthma issues as well. And then like we saw, okay, it's because Singapore is so densely constructed. One of the reasons why we have this is because of the building materials and the resultant pollutants that are emitted. So actually, if you see densely constructed countries around the world, capital cities usually, beyond Singapore, as KL, as Bangkok, you see a higher correlation of people with respiratory issues, especially in the young. In Singapore, you throw a stone, you can find someone with same sinus problems, same asthma issues because of how we're constructed. So actually, if you look at a house, we have a lot of air purifiers. So we've been thinking, how can we leverage on the bigger surface areas around us to deliver impact? Actually, I'll tell you the truth. I started Gush in uni, in year 3. Gush started because I was drunk. So I had too much whiskey. And then I was lying on the couch actually, and then I was just like looking at the walls, like, and I was like, hey, actually the walls got a bigger surface area. How come? Why isn't anyone tapping on the bigger surface area to deliver impact for people inside? So it came very natural to me, and I was like thinking, is there a way to make something as aesthetic as paint functional? I didn't do material science. I studied biz ed, I did finance. My co-founder is actually an engineer and a scientist. So then I found him. I was like, hey, actually, have you thought about this? And he said, hey, yeah, actually can try something. So then we started tinkering around. We bought some brand N paints from the Wu Jing Tian, and then we got some additive that we saw from Alibaba. We added it to the paint, and then it just coagulated into this really hard thing. We threw it at the wall, it bounced back. The tin obviously cannot paint. So then we tried many times, tinkering around with the formulation. We refined the additive even more. We changed the morphology of it. And then we actually consulted a lot of our professors in school. And then we eventually got our first product. So I was the first user in my house. And after we painted, because really from the start there was no smell and all that. Our neighbors were like, hey, you just painted your house, how come there's no smell? So they were also very like curious what it is. And then of course I shared with them this idea of mine, and they were like, hey, I also want to try. So then they tried, and then after that, they also were very happy with the results, and then through word of mouth it started spreading from there. The journey was quite incidental. Yeah,
your eureka moment was actually when you got sloshed.
Yeah.
Exciting. And then the proof of concept happened, and you deploy it in your own space, and then you got your neighbors to try, and then they came back with positive feedback.
That's right.
And then you went to the market with it.
Yeah. So at that point in time, I was still in school in US, and then I actually got offered a job in banking. So then this was where I was actually in Paris for a short while. My role needed me to be in the headquarters in the French bank. So I was there for a while, and then before I left for Paris, I actually sent in the paint to test with Two Suit. We want to see, can it really purify the air? Because even at that point of time, we didn't quite know. It's just like no smell, very good to us. We were confident about the results, but we weren't sure that this would pass the test. So then, I was in Paris doing my banking work, and then 7 months later, they came back with the results, and I remember still like opening the thing, like, you open your poker card like that. And then it actually said that it reduces the indoor air pollutants by about 91%. At that point, 91%. And then I was like, actually then it works. Yeah. Then I thought, okay, there's a huge market for Southeast Asia, since we're building so much properties, not just in Singapore but in the region, and I thought that there could be a huge market here. So then I came back. I surprised my mom, because she hasn't seen her son in so long in Europe, right? And then my mom asked me like, oh, why are you back? Then I said, I quit my job. And then she said, why?
Siao are you?
Siao. And I said, I'm going to start my own company. And she said, oh, what company? And I said, I'm going to start my own paint company. Then at that point of time, there was a tear that rolled down her eye.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I like to think that it was being happy for me. She was so happy that she teared. But probably it was like, wow, so zai, what the pay so much money for you to go to school and do this kind of okay. So anyway, she said after that, I'm going to give you 6 months to try this out. 6 months, if this doesn't work, quit and go back to banking. So I said, Mom, like 6 months is nothing, right? What can I do in 6 months?
Yeah.
And truth be told, like 6 months later, nothing happened. But on 8th month, we came out on the Lianhe Zaobao. I can't remember what report it was, but we came out on the papers. And I cut it out and I showed my mom. And then my mom was like, my son, from day one, I've always believed in you. I was like, yeah, okay.
Oh, damn drama.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest naysayer and my biggest motivator is my mom. And every time I have every time someone says that you can't do it, how are you going to fight against the big boys? It's my fuel to do more. Yeah.
I think the startup journey is really not easy, especially since you mentioned that you came from NUS, you studied BZ. That was really like something different, really. Because when I read through your profile, right, what's this BZ guy doing with chemical science? And then after that, what you just mentioned is that you were offered a job somehow in the banking finance world. It's usually quite well paying one. And you're probably dealing with a little bit more certainty, even though it's business, but banking and math and all that is something that's a very reliable business. Your mom should be very proud. Then you drop the bomb on her.
Yeah.
And what about that journey as a founder? Seeking funding and all that, I know also not easy. And you landed the CDL's funding, and it's not small. It's actually 3 mil, right?
That's right.
Series A.
No, that's pre-Series A.
Pre-Series A. Very admirable. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, definitely very tough journey. When I first started out, we wanted to just functionalize paints. That was the whole thing, right? How can we functionalize the biggest surface areas around us? So we came into this industry with a very naive and bright-eyed approach, thinking that it was going to be not so difficult.
And disrupt, right?
And disrupt. But this industry is the construction industry is very traditional. It's one of the oldest industries in the world.
And the giants are there.
There's just giants. So if you look at the market, there are giants right on the top. And if you think about paints, there are a couple of names that first pop to mind. May not be Gush at this point, but hopefully soon it will. But there are all these giants on top. And then there's this huge void. And there's a startup called Gush. So actually there's a lot of room to climb to get anywhere. But therein also lies the opportunity, right? There's also a lot of if there's room, then there's also a lot of space for us to grow. So it's been very, very tough. I think, dealing with the operational aspects of it, trying to get colors right, of which there's many, many colors for many, many different color preferences for our customers. Trying to get different ranges of products right, trying to get sizing, supply chain, having to deal with manufacturing, having to deal with after-sales service. There's so many different aspects of the business that you never really learn, not even from biz at school. And then you just got to learn JIT just in time as you're getting through all these problems itself. So certainly not easy. So I think founders are very resilient kind of people.
If you survive.
If you survive.
Yeah.
But even if you fall, you probably want to start something else. I think it's very difficult to work for somebody else after this anymore. But they're very resilient people, and a lot of times it becomes quite emotional because you don't get to share any of these problems with anybody else.
Yeah.
Like to your wife, unless she works with you.
Yeah.
Or your girlfriend, you got to tell them happy things, right?
You also don't want to bring home the problem.
Yeah, correct. And then to your investors, you obviously want to show them a nice side of the story. To your employees, for sure, of course, it's gonna be. You cannot say it's so bad. So you bottle a lot of emotions to yourself.
It's very lonely.
It's a very lonely journey. Yeah. So I think when founders come together and they have a can of beer, they can just talk about problems and cry together. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been tough.
Okay. After this, we're gonna get sloshed, and then maybe we'll have a few eureka moment. Yeah, you mentioned these few things about the operational aspects, that there's a lot of things for you to tinker with, right? It's not just about the business administration part. That's probably up your alley, but then there's a creative aspect, the color ranges, right? And then the performance metrics, right? Which is basically the USP, the narrative that you have is that it purges, it cleans, and it filters. But beyond that, right? the visual aspect, right? Which is people must identify that you have good colors. The bare minimum, if you're going to fight with the giants, right, is that you must have the colors, right? And then there's another part, which is the application.
Yeah.
Paint, and is it smooth? Is it easy to do? Are you going to have any negative feedbacks from the people on the ground who are applying your paint? And the worst thing is that as a startup is that you want to be very easy to let people, adopt, low barrier to entry and the least amount of resistance.
Yes.
But were there?
Absolutely.
So
much
were you expensive? Because we talked about this, sustainable products usually cost more.
Yes. So then I think there's a few things to that question. I'll talk about the application and how we thought about the formulation of the paints first. So admittedly, like the first few iterations of our paint was not the most user-friendly. So when it comes to the contractor, it's not super easy to repaint. But then, we realized that in order for us to get the buy-in from the customer, both from the end user, the homeowner, as well as the person that's actually applying the product, we need to make sure that it is firstly with enough colors that suits the homeowners, and then the paint is easy enough to apply. So we went through many different iterations. I think right now our flagship care and clean care is probably at like 37th iteration already. So many different formulations until now, such that we are able to find a nice balance. Yeah, it's also quite tricky because contractors, they like to dilute the paint after they buy it so that it can have more volume. It's just the way that the SOP works.
But it loses its efficacy.
It does a little bit. But then that also means that from the manufacturing side, do I make it thicker so that when they dilute it, they can have more and then it becomes the normal product? And then on the other side, we have other customers who like to DIY. So homeowners, when they take the paint, they don't want to dilute it because they're like, what if...
They don't know the mixture.
Yeah,
they don't know the ratio.
Exactly. It was a dilemma for us. Do we make it thicker or do we keep it the exact amount that it should be? Just open a can and use it.
You should have done a pro version.
Yeah, so now we have. Now we have a pro version.
Okay.
Yeah, so now we have. So there's all these kind of things that we have to grapple with, right? Like who is our customer, and because it's a market where you have different kinds of people that can actually use the product. So then it was quite tough for us to figure out how to get the balance right. I think now we've done already a good job. When it comes to colors, when we first started out, we really didn't know what the market preference was. So we just took the market leaders, the incumbents in the market, and we saw their color charts, and they were like, okay, I like this color, I like this color, I like this color, I like this color. We spoke to some interior designers, and then they help us to pick out some palettes that they think are trending, and then we just incorporated all these things into our color chart. So now we have more than 200 colors in our book itself. But as a paint company, I can tell you also that if you want any color to be...
You can customize.
You can customize. Yeah, because we have different pigments that we can add into the paint algorithmically in order to form the color that you want. So color should be the least of our concerns. It is the hygiene factor for paints. Then on top of that, we go beyond. So then lastly, on your question about the cost, right? A lot of people think that there is a green premium when it comes to sustainable products. And economically, there should be, because green products are usually new products. So new products usually don't have the volume that they have yet because they're so new as compared to the traditional products that have been around for like 30 years and they have established their supply chains and then got discounts from the bulk orders. So green products, which are new, typically don't have that volume yet and it thus don't have that cost advantage. For Gush, I think because we understand our customer preferences, we always try to keep our pricing competitive, if not cheaper. Our pricing ethos is always competitive, if not cheaper, for every class of product. Many times people try to compare our best product with like a normal market product. So that is quite a mismatch in terms of comparison.
Not apple to apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if you compare our care and clean care, the best in our range, with the premium range of the market leaders in Singapore, it's usually competitively priced, if not even cheaper. Yeah. So that is a big misconception that we're trying to change from the market.
But what about baseline? Baseline wise, are you competitive as well?
Yes. All our products are competitive.
So like the baseline would be usually the super mattes.
That is SKK, right? So yes, we are also competitive in that regard as well.
If we go past the fact that most people still see paint being decorative, and then now you're saying that paint is more than just colors, it's going to do all this purification and all that. There's a whole lot of education that's needed.
Yes.
And with that, you need to have a lot of marketing costs, a lot of time invested in selling. I think, for instance, let's say an ID is sitting down here talking to a homeowner,
Yeah.
and he could just put one line inside there and say that he's using an established brand, albeit that the brand is probably the lowest performance, lowest benefits, but because of that brand attachment, he doesn't even need to explain that in his quotation. Then the moment he introduces, let's say, Gush Paints, for example, and to a layperson, immediately say, why are you using this brand? Then in Chinese, we call 解释成本. Basically, the explanation capital becomes very high. Yeah. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I acknowledge that this is the industry. I mean, the incumbents have been here for the last 30, 40, 60 years. So like they have top of mind, they come out in ads on prime time.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to shake that. And also, like you said in the example, when they specify the products, it is so much easier to do it with the incumbents. But what we're seeing now is that there's an increase. There's quite a sharp increase in terms of people who are a lot more aware that the building materials that they use.
The Gen Zs.
The Gen Zs, even millennials are also catching up. They're looking at this materials and they're thinking, actually, there's much better options out in the market. That is one trend that we love. Because then they can research it themselves and they can realize, actually there's much more better stuff in the market. On the educational piece, we really started off with the funds that we raised from CDL and all that. We actually started to do a lot more of this education. But education is very expensive. Admittedly, our war chest is not as strong as the market leaders. War chest lah. So the ability to educate and to get the mind share of customers is still higher. Over the last few years, actually, we had an additional focus beyond just educating the customer on homeowners. We also try to educate the contractors,
the applicators, the specifiers, the designers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And through that, we try to make it easy for them then to educate the customers and become a mouthpiece for us. So
the advocates.
Advocates. Yeah. So understandably, the 解释成本 is high, but we hope that through the margins that we give them, it helps to bridge that gap also. Separately, also I think innovation for us comes from many forms, not just in the product point of view. We have things like sample kits that we can give to the customer. These sample kits, I mean, if you think about paints, really the first thing you think about is color. People try to get the color as right as possible. And typically when they want to see colors, they would have to go to the paint shop and then you have to buy a can of either 1 liter, the smallest, or even some other brands have like 200 ml.
They have the small rollers, it's very little one.
So for us, we wanted to make this as simple as possible. I mean, with that 1 liter, you typically just scoop out a little bit and then you paint a little bit and then you throw away the rest, which is super unsustainable. If it's the wrong color, you got to go many, many rounds. So what we've done is actually we developed a small 20 ml paint pack. It is like a ketchup pack. So you can squeeze out, it comes with a sponge, a tray, as well as a piece of paper. We can paint it on that piece of paper so you can see. Nice. You can paint it on your wall. And because different lightings will show the colors will show up differently in different lighting, so you can bring that piece of paper to different parts of the room, or you can also paint on different parts of the room. But now with this 20 ml pack, you can order as many as you want because it's very, very affordable. We can ship it directly to your house because it can fit in the envelope, and it's just a lot more sustainable. So things like that we do to help designers make it easier to push the colors to the customer. And then, of course, because of the health benefits that our products have, typically the designers can increase their margins.
Since you're talking about this, right, how accessible are your products? Again, in comparison to the incumbents, they are everywhere in your neighborhood, in your hardware shops, right? Are you there?
The retail market for us is almost non-existent. Yeah, when we started out, we wanted to just do e-commerce. Online. Yeah, so D2C, direct to consumer approach. So it still remains as our strategy this time because the retail strategy will require us to give a lot of margins to the reseller, which is something that we wanted to save and give to the customer directly. So now what we do is that we have added that component where we work with all these contractors. And for contractors, when they buy through us, we actually offer them next day delivery, if not max 2 days. So as long as there's sufficient planning for the project, then we can actually ship quite well in time to the site. And this is nothing that I want to share. We actually ship the products to the site. You don't need to bring your guy to come by in a lorry to load up the van and then bring it to wherever. We ship it to site so then your workers can just appear and then they can start painting.
I think the major tackle is this familiarity and predictability. What I realized in the industry is largely Singapore interior design industry, construction industry is very resistant to change because of familiarity. Sometimes it's because I go to this hardware shop and because there is a credit and because it's near my, the route to work, my route to the factory, my route to the warehouse, and it's just 顺便. The other thing is, of course, is that with established brands, the element of predictability in terms of result is already there. What that also means is it's not just a matter of color and performance, but even sometimes when there are disputes, that there is an avenue for some form of recourse. Yeah. And I suppose that's something that you're also looking into as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So service support lah.
Yes. So after sales service is very important for us. I mean, we have a dedicated team, customer experience team that actually goes down to ensure that any technical issues wise is resolved. And we actually have enough responsibility to send a team down to try and solve any problems that occur. Speaking to the designers and the contractors as well, we also offer like a lot of technical support in case there's any issues or in case they need us to help to speak to the homeowners as well. So that's what we can do right now with our with our limited resources and limited time in the market. And as we grow with more support from our customers, then we will get better and better.
But I understand now you're not exactly small. In this 8 years, right, 8 years plus, you guys are managed to grow to even US.
Yes.
And then currently Dubai as well. Or rather the Emirates.
Our core market is in Singapore, but we are also in the Middle East. We're in Hong Kong, we're in China, and now we're trying to start to enter into Malaysia. Why I left US out is because the recent tariffs has kind of put a dent on things. So that has slowed down a lot of our progress in the US. We are pausing that for a while until we figure out what's the best way to...
For 4 years lah. For 4 years.
Yeah, so until we manage to figure out the supply chain, i.e. if we have a manufacturer on the ground, then we can start the operations again.
Okay.
Yeah, but Singapore is still the core market. I think where we've expanded is that we've gone beyond the residential B2C market. We've gone into the contractor market. Now we're actually doing the enterprise market. So we've painted a lot of very interesting buildings. We've painted places like the BC Academy, the actual authority for building construction here in Singapore. We've painted Holland Road Shopping Centre. We've painted a lot of hospitals.
Hotel, right?
Hotels like Robertson House. And we've also done some properties in Hong Kong, like the Jardine House, which is the most iconic. We've also done Alexandra House in Hong Kong, both under Hong Kong land. So things like that. And we've worked with a lot of developers to bring that vision to light. Now we're getting into HDB projects as well, which is a different ballgame altogether. HDB has this new push to have heat reflective paints, heat reflective exterior paints, and we're one of the companies that have been approved by HDB on the HDB materials list. So right now we are working with a lot of contractors to repaint HDB buildings apart from the HDB apartments, and we are also looking at repainting car parks as well. So that enterprise market is a completely different game altogether. And I think for us, because our ethos is pricing wise is to be competitive, if not cheaper. So that has also allowed us to penetrate into that market, and we have the right products beyond what I shared just now that are able to cater to those categories at the same time.
So now you have baseline paint. You have paint that purifies, and now you have paint that basically lowers the temperature.
Yes.
Exactly like plants.
Yeah.
And it's not just green. You have other colors, 200 over colors.
Correct.
So nice. On that, right, and there was this study on paint on surfaces, especially on buildings and all that. And this came out I think 5 years ago. And I did a bit of research on that. And I was trying to understand whether your paint actually had that ingredient inside. And the ingredient I'm talking about is this chemical that I'm talking about is titanium dioxide. Now, I think that's bullshit now. Because from what I understand in terms of the research, right, is that basically it requires a large surface area for it to have some efficacy. And then on top of that, it's heavily dependent on having light to kind of activate it.
The heat reflective part.
No, not the heat reflective part, but the air purifying part.
Okay.
So titanium dioxide, what I read about it, right, is that if it's painted on the surface of the building, and let's say a typical 10-story building, it's photocatalytic, meaning that the sun hits it, the UV triggers and activates it, then it will perform that function.
Yeah.
But in its total calculation, that one building can only absorb up to 1 car's worth of fumes in a year. So there are some people who are actually claiming certain surfaces in the interior space right now, in tile form or in wallpaper form, and then it says that it cleans the air and all that.
Yeah.
I know that it does, but it's dependent on these two things. One, surface area, and second, lights, or rather ultraviolet lights or some form of lights. Yours doesn't need all these, right?
Titanium dioxide is a very common material used in paints. It's typically used to whiten something, is to increase the opacity of paints. So actually all paints would have titanium dioxide. The key here, how it's able to act as a catalyst, and more specifically a photocatalyst, is that they have changed the morphology. So they made it nano size such that it's small enough to be able to react with the UV light. And in most areas, even in this place, you don't have a lot of sunlight coming in, so then you don't have that ability it won't function. So we saw that problem very, very early on, and then we developed we developed a catalyst from here. We didn't use titanium dioxide anymore. We changed it to something else. We developed such that it only requires a few lumens of energy from LED light sources to power the catalyst so that it's able to purify the air. We thought about it even deeper, like what happens at night? When you sleep, when it's dark, it essentially doesn't function again, right? So 1/4 of the time doesn't quite work anymore. We then developed something even further, right? So we looked at how can we mechanically, structurally cause this catalysis to happen. So ours is also a metal oxide. It's not titanium dioxide, but it's something else. We've changed the morphology such that it's become quite complex, and it's able to function even without light. So even in absence of light, 24/7 it's able to purify the air, break down the pollutants, and that's really our unique advantage and 2 steps ahead of the competition who really just uses titanium dioxide. A lot of new entrants are saying that they can purify the air, but it's like, between a Toyota and a Ferrari, both can drive, right? And which one can deliver better performance? This is the question. So I think for us, we've thought about it from a very deep angle, from a very customer-centric angle, to try and deliver the best performance for their needs.
You hear it from the founder's mouth. We had to throw in some science into this because otherwise people will just think that it's all like green fluff, right? But really it's not. Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem.
We know about the industry. It's still pretty much traditional and all that. You're selling essentially a high-tech paint, and you mentioned there's a lot of 解释成本, a lot of explanation capital, and it's a good thing that you've got some capital now. You've got the investments, and of course that basically is like a badge of credibility. But I suppose it's still a challenge to kind of change the mindset of not just the consumers, but also the trade and the industry. Yeah. So are you having some success on this?
It's a journey for us because we've only been around for 8 years. So every time we speak to people, they are amazed at the products that we have. And then after that, then they slowly try to find out more and educate. But it's a long process. I think with designers, with the industry, they're obviously usually quite familiar and quite used to what they are currently using. So the switching cost is there. But now we also see, like you said, right, there's a trend of people looking at sustainability now. So from the homeowners, from their own mind space, they also want their home to be beautiful, healthy, as well as sustainable. And when they start asking these questions to interior designers, then there are products out there in the market. I just want interior designers to know that there are products out there in the market that have these functions that can solve these needs. So that is really where we play in. If they are open to alternatives, we have also the other products that can fight in that same category as the market leaders. So products that are not air purifying, so it's a slightly lower price point, but it still has the beautiful benefits of being low VOC, no odor, and things like that.
The baseline products.
So we also have those. And I think more excitingly, as a company, we are very agile and always looking forward in terms of innovation. One of the latest things that we have developed is actually this product called Ultra. The problem statement comes from being around for 8 years in the market, and we also know that typically for paints, both interiors and exteriors, it's usually a 3-coat system. So your first coat is a layer of sealer that goes onto the wall, and then 2 layers of paint on top that gives it its features and colors. The sealer would increase the adhesion of the paint to the wall. It also seals off any impurities coming from the concrete layer. And then you have your paints on top that gives it its colors and its features. But with 3 coats of material on the wall, you also need 3 units of manpower. You need the guy to come in to paint, wait for it to dry, paint again, wait for it to dry, and then you got to paint the last coat on. And typically in a renovation project, the paint is the last thing that goes on. So by the time the paint comes on, it's super tight in terms of timelines already. That's something very, very difficult to manage. The more important thing is that because there's 3 units of manpower, manpower cost is very, very high. It's typically about 80 to 85% of the project cost. We keep
Plus
thinking,
the potential of shoddy workmanship
yes,
due to time constraint.
correct. So we keep thinking, how do we reduce our labor reliance? And that led to how do we reduce the number of coats on our wall? So in 2023, we actually developed a paint that integrates the sealer into the paint itself, such that it's a 2-in-1 paint. You only need 2 coats instead of 3. And with that, we're able to shave off 1 coat of material, 1 coat of manpower, and that reduces 33% of the cost. But then we thought about it even deeper, from a more fundamental level, and we asked ourselves, what is the point of paint in the first place? And if you think about it, actually paint is there to cover any imperfections in the wall. It's there to change the color of the wall. It's there to make the wall look new again. So actually paints are very cosmetic in nature. And we were wondering what other industry out there in the
Cosmetic
market.
law.
Yeah, exactly. So we started thinking of how can we tap on the insights from the cosmetic industry to then develop new products that we can use for paints. And we started studying things like foundation and concealer. And we realized with one single coat on the skin is able to cover all the blemishes and yet have all the features like retaining moisture, rejecting UV, and so on and so forth. When we studied the formulation of foundation, we realized they actually grinded the particle sizes very finely, and they had added polymers and additives inside that's able to allow it to level and flow very well. And we thought, since paint is like makeup for your walls, why hasn't anyone taken that same technology and put it into paints? And so that's what we did. And in 2023, we developed a 3-in-1 paint with the sealers blended in with very high opacity, such that instead of 3 coats, you only need 1 coat. And with that means you only need 1 coat of manpower as well.
Yeah.
And that shaves off a lot of time, a lot of manpower, a lot of material costs. So things like this that we do, right, to bring innovation to its extreme, to really bring that value to both the customer, the contractor, as well as the interior designer. That's really who we are. In terms of DNA, we are really rooted in that innovation piece, that science piece, as well as wellness. How can we then use this to drive value? And that's really the key difference between us and the other players in the market.
You're in a position whereby you're not content with the current practice.
Yeah.
Your innovation is not innovation for innovation's sake or disrupt for disrupt's sake, but rather adding value to the consumer. And I love the fact that you draw inspiration from the cosmetic industry. But I drew another inspiration from this, and it reminded me of the kopi siu dai or gao siu dai. So obviously, in order to be 3-in-1 and perform that function, right, it needs to be thick ma, and so gao la. Siu dai because basically on timeline and it's light in essence when it comes to the application part. So I love that. Let's do some measurement here. And I do this with the IDs, right, all the time, which is basically I ask them not about their sales volume, but about the square footage of projects they have done.
Wow.
And that's usually how I kind of measure the experience level. Because if you tell me that you have done at least like 1 million or a few million under your belt, that gives me the length and breadth of your skill set. So if I were to ask you to off the tip of your tongue or your head, right, what do you think is your square footage coverage? Singapore, locally only.
Wow, this can be a consulting question. I don't know about square footage, but I know we have done 8,000 plus projects from the residential homes all the way to the buildings.
Yeah.
Revenue-wise is a few millions, I think, even double-digit millions really. So actually quite a number. But if I were to think about square footage-wise, because I don't have the numbers of the painted area of all the different places, it's quite hard to give a gauge. But maybe, okay, let me take a stab at it. So buildings, also very hard to gauge. For homes...
But no, let me maybe put it in perspective then. If it's just to take a very conservative approach, since you've done buildings and all that. So let's rule that out. If you have, let's say, 8,000 projects, I'm going to minus off at least 1,000 from the building facades and all that, and just look at maybe 7,000 projects in an interior space. And assuming that each project has got at least maybe about 5,000 square feet of surface area. We're talking about walls, not floors.
Yeah.
Then we are easily looking at 35 million square feet.
Yes.
Now, again, let's draw a parallel to what Vera from Greenology said. All that paint is also breathing and purging and purifying. Then basically we're looking at about 35 million square feet of GLA, gross leaf area.
Yes.
Well, I mean, isn't that so?
Yeah.
And I guess the reason why I'm saying this is just to kind of show you the impact.
Yes.
Because you don't have to always look at things on a macro level. But if you look at one project at a time, right, and how one designer decides to, okay, I decide to go green. And they decided to kind of like build the new legacy, one project at a time, 1,000 square feet at a time. And over some time, eventually it will have an impact one. And 35 million square feet is not a small number.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I mean, and if you put it in these quantifiable terms, then it feels massive actually. I mean, over 8 years, we've just been trudging along, like just pushing this out as much and as fast as we can. So this perspective on the numbers is it's very interesting to us. Also, like it's great to know that like so many homes and thereby lives have been helped by the use of these materials.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. End of the day, this is all we want to do, right? To create impact for the world.
Exactly. That's why it's important to measure because and to give you some perspective or maybe even newer targets. 8 years to hit 35 million square feet. Another 2 more to hit 100 mil. Something to think about based on all the future thinking that's been happening with your innovation and all that. And I know there are probably some trade secrets that you can't say, but what do you think is in store in the next few years? What can we expect, and how are you going to kind of rock the boat in this industry?
So we go back to base in terms of the why we exist. We want to functionalize every surface around us, and we start off with the bigger surface areas indoors. We then look at the bigger surfaces outdoors, the exterior walls. And then we also look at windows, the other key surface areas. So we have things like window films that are able to reject heat, but it's also very transparent. So you don't compromise the beautiful views of the home, but you get to fight against the rising heat, rising temperatures that we face here in Singapore. So this is the things that we look at, right? How can we functionalize surfaces? And more, how can we then look at other surfaces like our floors, tabletops? We're now even doing trials with SBS, even on urban mobility assets. How can we tap on the biggest mobile surfaces around us to deliver impact? So things like that. When it comes to the home, not in a very sci-fi sense, but we think that in the future, the bigger surface areas would be also reactive to the people, would be alive, right? It would be reactive to the people inside. As the heat goes up, how does the paint, how does the materials respond to heat? How does it then interact with our humidity? How does it interact with our CO2 levels, oxygen levels, and so on and so forth? And these are things that we've read in research papers is possible already. And then how then do we make this commercially viable now to bring this to the mass market? Yeah.
I got a funny question, but it's not so much all the high-tech stuff that you have just said, but rather the thing that I think goes unnoticed in the renovation process is that typically in a project, we finish off with the painting. There are usually leftovers. And most of the time, people would think that if you have the leftovers, leave it for me so I can do my touch-up. But the homeowners may or may not use it and they leave it over. They leave it untouched in their bomb shelters for months or even years sometimes. And then eventually it's gone back. The color has changed. You can't just use it to go and touch up. It's gone back. It's also harmful to the inhabitants in that space. And then what they end up doing is that they put it down the rubbish chute and then stains the walls. Or what's worse is that eventually still in a liquid state, it oozes out into our drains and it starts to harm the environment. Does Gush has any policy on this? The reason why I ask this is because, if you want to be truly sustainable, right, there is this cradle-to-cradle approach.
Yes.
Which is the manufacturing of the product in a green way, the sale, the deployment, the application, right down to eventually the disposal. And I'm just curious because I think most people don't talk about it, but paint, after all, is something, if not taken care of correctly during disposal, can harm the environment dramatically.
We are going to unveil something soon. So not yet. We don't have this right now in terms of policy. So far, how we've been doing is just to advise our customers to let the paint, if they want to dispose it, let the paint dry. And then once it's in solid form, then they can dispose it safely. Moving forward, I agree, as a sustainable company, that cradle-to-cradle approach, making sure that the whole life cycle of not just the paint, but the packaging of the paint is also taken care of. That is something we have in the works. For customers that already know that they want to dispose of it right away, there are things that we already have in our product list that can be added to the paint, allow it to harden, and then that actually can be then thrown away quite quickly. Yeah, I think we will release more details about this soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will be something like, the wine industry, right? They used to be in bottles. And then now they have like this, I don't know, it looks like the, petrol oil.
Yes.
The one that you can just basically, it's in cardboards, then you just,
box
you
wines.
just like orange pack, the orange juice one, you just open the thing and then you can pour. Why does anyone do that? Basically, why always pour from a canister when you can pour with a nozzle?
Yeah.
Maybe-
I guess wine is atas, so like you want to have a nice package.
Okay, now we're going to come to the end of this show. Really enjoy talking to you.
Likewise.
Especially since the fact that I'm a like green designer and I geek out when I get a chance to talk to like-minded sustainable interior spaces and architectural advocates, and we geeked out once already, and now we're doing it again in a proper session. Yeah, so it's been really fun and really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be conversing and hopefully share some ideas that can go into your your thought process.
Yes.
Minus the alcohol lah. Okay, so for vendors, right, we usually ask, we will actually have a different approach to the ending. For interior designers, we will ask them interesting questions left by another designer or a vendor. But for vendors in our podcast, we actually do quick fire questions, and it's going to be fun, personal, and I want you to quickly answer without much thinking.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can do that.
Okay.
And it's going to be light, it's going to be relatable. So, you have many colors where you say 200 over colors in your catalog. So if I were to ask you, what's your favorite Gush color name? What's that color and why?
I love this color called All Good Things. Just to describe to the viewers and listeners, All Good Things is actually our purest white. It's the white in the most pure form. We started with this color because white is the fundamental base, right? Essentially, all good things start from this. Yeah, all good things come from here. And we believe that home should be your refuge. When painted this color, you come home, it's a sense of calm, tranquility, pureness, and in that, then also freedom as well. And that is where you seek refuge, and that's where all good things can then originate. Yeah.
Nice. The narrative is nice. In the design world, white is also seen as a reset button. We take cue from nature, and in nature there are 4 seasons, and white represents winter, and where all things kind of like die off or goes into some form of hibernation, and then spring comes with colors. And so white is like the reset. Kind of find some profoundness shit going on here. It's kind of interesting, Now, Gush is your baby. It's been your baby for the last 8 years. So if Gush is actually a spirit animal, right? What do you think it would be?
I mean, back in my banking days, the correctest answer would be to say it's an ant. Ants, because they can work very well in teams. They can lift like 10 times its weight in objects, right? So it's very strong, work well in teams, very good team player. But that'll be not very genuine. I think personally, the answer to me, and I at some point I thought about it also. Like I like pangolins. Yeah, like Sandshrew, right? Pokemon. If people don't know it, it's like this armored, like
armadillo
kind of thing. So it's actually very hard on the outside. There's this armor, but it's very soft on the inside.
Yeah.
So I think like Gush, it's very protective on the outside, but actually inside there's a lot of warm elements that is able to help purify the air, is able to bring a lot of health and wellness to the people inside. And I think pangolins are also very misunderstood. People don't think about pangolins, right? At first, I think some people might actually Google what pangolins are, because it's not very heard of. It's not very noticed in the world. Pangolins are actually endangered. But the point is that pangolins actually are one of nature's silent ecosystem cleaners. So they actually consume like 70 million pests and insects. So they are nature's best pest control. Yeah. And similar to us, even though we are not super big and super famous, we help to do all these things, oftentimes quite unnoticed, but we deliver a very big impact.
So humble. 35 million square feet, you say. No impact. The last question, and then I think this is a good one because it gives you a chance to demystify the myth that's about paint that you wish that people would stop believing, that they think wrongly about what paint does.
The key thing that that comes to mind right now is that people think that paint is just about color. Yeah, this is the biggest myth. Paint is the biggest surface area that people interact with, right? And being the biggest surface area, there's a lot it can do to interact with your heat, humidity, things like mold, even the air quality levels inside. So there's so much that paints can do to act as a layer to help improve all these different elements that is in the indoor and exterior environment. So actually paints can do so much more for you with the bigger surface area around us.
I think the part is the convincing one, because it's something that probably will feel very too sci-fi for them. Like, sure, bo, really, you know, I've never seen paint that way. And truth be told, paint is probably one of the most easy to hands-on DIY thing that everyone has got some form of exposure to, whether you're a kid or doing watercolor right down to, you know, buying the paint and DIY for your new home.
Yeah.
I think the last thing that people will think of is that it has some high-tech innovation behind it. And I guess this episode of the SIXiDER Show really kind of gives us the chance to understand Gush, its founding story, its background, the tech behind it. And I think more importantly, the vision. Because it's not just this, it's the goal that you're trying to set yourself, which is to, you know, bring value to the inhabitants in the space.
Thank you for this opportunity to share. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah,
And,
it's our pleasure. With that, we've come to the end. We're still going to get him to tekan one of the IDs with his tough questions. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the SIXiDER Show. We've learned a lot, and we hope that you would also be, if you're in the lookout for home renovation and getting paint, maybe you want to try to explore Gush, because it's a paint and more, right? It's actually a passive air filter and a whole lot more. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us in the next episode of the SIXiDER Show. Bye, Lester.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.